Hilton brings you new ways to stay. With experiences that let you capture the glory days. Introducing the Graduate Hotels. Each inspired by local college towns, these stays are always original and never boring. Get in touch with traditions all across the country and enjoy a stay that's a class above the rest. Book at Graduate Hotels with Hilton Honors Points at Hilton.com. It's a win-win. Hilton, for the stay.
USAA knows dynamic duos can save the day, like superheroes and sidekicks or auto and home insurance. With USAA, you can bundle your auto and home and save up to 10%. Learn more and get a quote at USAA.com/bundle. Restrictions apply.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
From the Fifth Quarter Studio in Madison, Wisconsin, you're listening to the Coaching Youth Hoops Podcast.
They're playing
Basketball. Here's our hosts, Steve Collins. And Bill Flitter.
Hi, Coach. It's Wednesday. I'm going to start my own song. It's Wednesday.
Yeah. Coaches, welcome to Wednesday. And you're like, what? wait, what? Yeah. We're on Wednesdays now.
For the time being,
Coach to do 7 days a week.
Coach.
So I'm slowly getting there. We're at 3 now. No, we're launching a new podcast and I'm super excited about. It's something that I've been thinking about for a while, and it's for parents, and it's for parents with athletes. And we want to help educate parents to be better parents with athletes, how to raise athletes the right way, how to nurture them. And it ranges from anything from mental health to nutrition, to how to deal with burnout and overuse and all of that, all of the things that a student athlete goes through. We're going to be covering on the podcast. So we would love your feedback. Again, this is a pilot podcast. If you like it, we'll continue, and we'll probably even break it out into its own podcast. We hope you enjoy.
And like Coach No, give them your email address one more time, Coach.
Email me at Coach Bill at Coaching Youth Hoops. Give me a thumbs up, thumbs down, suggestions, feedback.
Topics.
Yeah, topic ideas. Again, we were doing this to help our parent community.
Yeah, I think it will be great. All right, let's head off to the podcast.
Okay, so picture this.
It's a, sunny Saturday morning, and you're at the park.
That smell of fresh cut grass is in the air.
And there's that unmistakable sound of kids playing sports, right?
Yeah.
Maybe it's the thud of a soccer ball or the squeak of sneakers on a basketball court.
Or
the cheers erupting from a Little League game.
Whatever the sport, there's just this certain magic to those moments, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely.
That infectious energy, that
pure joy of kids just cutting loose and going for it. It's something special.
Yeah, it really is.
But here's the thing that's got us really curious.
What happens when that joy starts to fade?
When the pressure mounts, the demands increase.
And the fun gets overshadowed by, burnout.
Right.
And that's what we're diving deep into today.
Because, let's face it, youth sports should be a positive experience.
Of course.
But the reality is,
there's this growing concern about burnout among young athletes. And we know you're here for a reason.
Maybe you're a parent, a coach, or maybe you just have a front row seat to this world.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever brought you here, we're glad you're with us.
It's a topic that's close to my heart as well.
And I think it's important to address head on because the statistics around youth sports burnout are, they're pretty eye-opening to say the least.
To put it mildly, get this. A whopping 70% of kids quit organized sports by the time they hit 13.
Wow.
13. We're not even talking high school yet.
I mean, sure, kids change their minds. They explore different interests.
Right.
But 70%, that's a mass exodus.
So what's really going on here?
Is it just a case of kids being kids, or is there something more at play?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
And I think it's safe to say that it's rarely as simple as kids being kids.
Okay.
We really need to unpack the concept of burnout itself.
Because it goes way beyond just being tired or, needing a break. We're talking about this complex interplay of physical, emotional, and psychological factors.
Okay, so let's bring it down then.
What does burnout actually look like in young athletes?
Well, there are 3 core dimensions to burnout that we need to consider.
Okay.
First, there's the physical and emotional exhaustion.
And this goes beyond just needing a good night's sleep.
We're talking about that bone-deep fatigue, a constant feeling of being drained no matter how much rest they get.
And this ties directly into the second dimension,
which is a reduced sense of accomplishment.
Think about it. A child experiencing burnout might be objectively skilled.
They might even be winning.
But they feel ineffective.
Like nothing they do is ever good enough.
Wow. So they could be racking up trophies and still feel totally defeated inside.
That's heartbreaking.
It really is.
And this brings us to the third dimension, which is where things can get really serious.
Okay.
The devaluation of the sport itself.
This is when something that was once a source of joy and excitement
becomes something they resent, something they just want to escape from.
So it's not just about wanting to try a different activity. It's like their whole relationship with the sport has become negative. Right. That's a big deal.
So what's causing this shift?
What are the factors that contribute to this kind of deep-rooted burnout?
There are a number of factors, some more obvious than others.
But even the seemingly straightforward ones often have, layers of complexity.
Yeah.
Let's start with the pressure to perform.
I mean, who hasn't felt that at some point in their lives, right?
Oh, absolutely. And I think we can all agree that the pressure doesn't magically disappear when you hit adulthood.
Right, exactly.
But for young athletes, especially those competing at higher levels,
pressure can be immense.
Yeah.
It's easy to point fingers at pushy parents or coaches who are overly focused on winning.
And while those external pressures are certainly a factor,
the pressure doesn't always come from the outside, does it?
You're spot on. It can be internalized as well.
Even very young children pick up on societal expectations.
They see the media glorifying elite athletes. They hear adults constantly talking about winning and losing.
And they internalize these messages about what it means to be successful.
It's like the pressure becomes part of their identity.
Their own internal dialogue, not just something imposed on them by others.
Right.
And I imagine that kind of pressure can be incredibly heavy for a young person to carry.
Absolutely.
And this ties into another big issue that we see contributing to burnout.
Early specialization.
Right, because we often hear this idea that if you want to be a great athlete, you have to pick a sport and stick with it year-round.
Right, exactly.
But the research is actually challenging that assumption.
It turns out that specializing in a single sport at a young age, it doesn't necessarily correlate with future success at the professional level.
Interesting.
In fact, pushing a child to focus intensely on just one sport year-round can actually increase their risk of injury.
That's counterintuitive, isn't it?
You'd think more practice would make them stronger, less prone to injury.
You'd think so, wouldn't you?
But their bodies are still developing.
They need variety, different movements to build a strong foundation.
And it's not just about the physical risks.
When your entire identity is wrapped up in one sport,
it can be devastating if something goes wrong.
An injury, a losing streak, even just a bad game can feel like the end of the world.
Which brings to mind those families who are at tournaments every single weekend.
Oh, yeah.
And it's not just one game. It's back-to-back, often in extreme heat.
With barely any time to catch their breath.
Right.
And we haven't even touched on the travel time.
Exactly.
And that brings us to another major factor contributing to burnout.
Lack of rest.
We tend to be so fixated on training, on drilling, on squeezing in as much practice as possible,
that we forget that rest and recovery are just as crucial for athletic development.
Especially for growing bodies.
So pushing kids to play through fatigue or soreness, even minor injuries, thinking it's building grit.
That could actually be doing more harm than good.
Exactly.
Rest isn't for the weak.
It's an essential part of the training process.
It's about allowing those muscles to repair, those skills to consolidate.
And preventing burnout before it even starts.
Okay, so we're starting to see how these factors can really, stack the deck towards burnout.
Right.
But let's say you're on the ground, you're seeing this firsthand, maybe even suspecting it in a young athlete.
How do you actually recognize the signs?
Because burnout, it's not always as obvious as a sprained ankle, right?
Absolutely right.
Burnout can be sneaky. It can creep up on you.
And the signs can be easy to miss, especially if you don't know what to look for.
So let's talk about those red flags.
What are some telltale signs that a young athlete might be on the road to burnout?
Well, on the physical side,
You might see things like chronic fatigue,
those nagging injuries that just don't seem to
or
heal.
a noticeable drop in their performance.
They might be putting in the same amount of effort or even more.
But the results just aren't there.
And these are kids who used to be bursting with energy.
Excited to get out on the field or
Yeah,
court, right?
exactly.
And then emotionally,
There might be significant shifts in their mood.
they might become more irritable
Quick to anger.
or seem withdrawn and down.
You might notice increased anxiety, especially around practices or competitions.
Or even, signs of depression.
And I imagine that socially, they might start to isolate themselves.
Because sports are often such a social activity. They
Absolutely.
might start skipping practices
Making excuses to avoid going to games.
or withdrawing from their teammates.
And this is where it gets tricky because some of these signs, mood swings, changes in behavior, difficulty sleeping.
Those could also just be chalked up to being a teenager, right?
Right, exactly.
It's not always easy to tell the difference.
So if you're a parent or a coach and you're seeing some of these red flags,
What should you do?
well, the first step is to rule out any other underlying factors.
A medical evaluation is essential to make sure there isn't a physical or medical condition contributing to these symptoms.
That makes total sense.
You don't want to jump to conclusions or assume it's burnout when it could be something else entirely.
Exactly.
And alongside the physical evaluation,
It's just as important to address the psychological and emotional aspects.
because at the end of the day, we're talking about a whole person, not just an athlete.
Okay, so how do you even begin to approach that?
Wow.
It often starts with creating a safe and supportive space for open and honest conversation.
And this is where parents and coaches can really make a difference.
Because if a young athlete feels like they can confide in the adults in their lives without being judged or dismissed,
They're much more likely to open up about what's really going on.
that makes sense.
But it also sounds like this could be a long process, right?
It's not like there's a quick fix for burnout.
You're absolutely right.
It's not about finding a magic solution or expecting them to snap out of it overnight,
It's about providing ongoing support, making adjustments where needed.
and recognizing that their well-being is always more important than their athletic performance.
Because here's the thing that really struck me as we were digging into this research.
The effects of burnout, they can be so much more far-reaching than we often realize.
Right.
We often think, oh, it's just a phase, they'll bounce back eventually.
But the reality is, untreated burnout can have real long-term consequences that extend far beyond the playing field,
It
right?
hit the nail on the head.
This isn't just about missing a season or two.
This is about potentially impacting their health,
Their relationships, their academic performance.
even their career choices down the line.
It's a ripple effect.
So we're not just talking about their performance on the field or the court.
We're talking about their overall well-being as human beings.
Exact.
And we're seeing a growing body of research linking youth sports burnout to an increased risk of mental health issues later in life.
Like what kind of issues?
We're talking about a higher susceptibility to things like anxiety, depression.
Even chronic stress and potentially disordered eating.
And remember, these are issues that can have a profound impact on their relationships, their ability to form healthy connections.
Their self-esteem, their overall quality of life.
That's a sobering thought.
And it makes this conversation so much bigger than just sports.
It really does.
And what's particularly concerning is that burnout can also lead to a lifelong aversion to physical activity.
Oh, wow.
Think about it. We encourage kids to participate in sports, to develop healthy habits.
To learn the importance of movement.
But burnout can actually have the opposite effect.
It's like the whole purpose of youth sports gets turned upside down.
Instead of fostering a love of movement,
It creates this negative association with physical activity that can last a lifetime.
right?
So what can we do?
Because this all sounds pretty bleak.
Is there hope?
What are the solutions, the strategies to prevent this from happening in the first place?
So is there any way to turn this ship around?
Where do we even begin to tackle a problem like this?
Well, the good news is...
There is hope.
Okay.
And it starts with recognizing that we, as a society, as a community,
As parents, as coaches?
we have the power to shift the culture of youth sports.
Okay. I like where you're going with that.
So how do we actually do that?
how do we move away from this pressure cooker environment and create an experience that's truly beneficial for young athletes?
Well, it's not about throwing the baby out with the bathwater.
Organized sports can offer so many amazing benefits for kids.
Teamwork, discipline, resilience.
Sure.
But we need to make sure those benefits aren't coming at the cost of their well-being.
And a lot of it comes down to shifting our priorities.
Okay.
Instead of putting so much emphasis on winning, on trophies, on scholarships.
What if we focused on fostering a love of the game?
On developing the whole athlete, on and off the field.
I love that. Because at the end of the day, isn't that what we really want for our kids?
To find joy in movement, in challenging themselves, in being part of a team.
Absolutely.
But how do we actually translate that into concrete actions?
What can parents and coaches do differently?
There are a number of evidence-based strategies that can make a real difference.
One of the most impactful is promoting multi-sport participation, especially at younger ages.
Okay, so we're talking about encouraging kids to try different sports throughout the year rather than specializing in just one.
Exactly.
And there are so many good reasons for this.
Physically, it helps them develop a wider range of skills, prevents overuse injuries.
And promotes overall athleticism.
Mentally, it keeps things fresh and exciting, prevents boredom.
And reduces the pressure that comes with having all their eggs in one basket.
It's like cross-training for life.
They're not just building a better athlete, they're building a more well-rounded, adaptable human being.
I love that analogy.
And who knows, they might even discover a hidden talent or passion they never knew they had.
Exactly. So it's not about pushing them to be the next LeBron James or Serena Williams.
It's about giving them the space to explore, to discover what lights them up.
Precisely.
And another crucial piece of the puzzle is fostering a positive team environment.
And that starts with the adults in the room, the coaches, the parents.
The league organizers.
Right.
We need to be mindful of the messages we're sending, both explicitly and implicitly.
So it's not just about what we say.
It's about what we do, how we act.
The kind of behavior we're modeling.
Exactly.
Are we emphasizing teamwork and respect?
Are we celebrating effort and improvement, or just wins and losses?
Are we creating a space where kids feel safe to make mistakes and learn from them?
These are the things that really shape a team's culture.
It's about building each other up, not tearing each other down.
Absolutely.
And this ties into another really important point that came up in our research.
And that's the power of communication.
Okay.
Open, honest, and supportive communication between athletes, parents, and coaches.
Because if we're not talking to each other, if we're not creating those lines of communication,
how can we possibly address these issues before they become serious problems?
Exactly.
And this communication needs to be a two-way street.
Parents, check in with your kids regularly.
Ask them how they're feeling, not just how they're performing.
Pay attention to their nonverbal cues.
Are they excited to go to practice, or are they dragging their feet?
Coaches, create an environment where athletes feel comfortable coming to you if they're struggling.
Even if it's about something outside of sports.
It's about remembering that these are whole people with lives and experiences that extend far beyond the game. So as we're wrapping up this deep dive,
what's the key takeaway you want to leave our listeners with?
I think the biggest takeaway is this.
We have more power than we realize to shape the culture of youth sports.
And create a more positive and supportive experience for our kids.
It starts with being informed.
With understanding the risks of burnout and recognizing the signs.
It's about being willing to challenge the status quo.
To ask tough questions and to advocate for change.
And it's about remembering that sports, at their core, should be about joy.
About connection, about pushing boundaries and discovering what we're capable of.
Exactly.
And we prioritize the well-being of our young athlete.
When we create environments that foster their love of the game.
We set them up not just for success in sports, but for a lifetime of healthy habits, positive relationships,
and a deep appreciation for the power of movement.
And that's a win-win in my book.
All right, so today we're diving into something that's pretty relevant to me, and I think a lot of people listening. Youth sports. And more specifically, why young athletes quit. You guys...
Halliday presents, in the red corner, the undisputed, undefeated Weed Whacker Guy. Champion of hurling grass and pollen everywhere. And in the blue corner, the challenger, extra strength Halliday. Eye drops that work all day to prevent the release of histamines that cause itchy allergy eyes. And the winner by knockout is Halliday. Halliday, bring it on.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
Sent over some really interesting research on this, a PhD thesis and a scientific article. Both get into this whole youth sports dropout crisis.
Yeah, and that crisis part, that's where things get interesting. I mean, the numbers on youth leaving sports can seem kind of alarming, right?
Yeah.
But these sources really push us to think beyond just labels.
Totally. It's like everyone's so quick to jump to dropout without really digging into what's actually going on. One thing that really struck me, especially in that PhD thesis, was how much athletes, parents, even coaches really disliked that term dropout.
It makes sense, though. When you think about it, calling young athletes dropouts kind of ignores the individual, right? They have their own reasons. And sport, it should be about choice, wouldn't you say? Like, as kids grow up, they're going to find new passions, different things they're interested in. It's natural.
Absolutely. And speaking of exploring different paths, the thesis actually breaks down different dropout types, which I found fascinating. They talk about the sampler, the participant, and the transfer. Way more nuanced than just saying everyone who quits is the same.
Right. Like, picture the sampler. You know, that kid who gets super stoked about every new hobby, dives in head first. They might try a sport for a season or two, get a feel for it. Then, boom, something else catches their eye, and they're off on a new adventure.
Oh, I know that kid. I was that kid, tried every sport under the sun, but I finally found what really clicked. And that's the thing, right? Not every kid who tries a sport is looking to go pro.
Exactly. Then you've got your participant. They're in it for the long haul. But even then, there's a whole spectrum, right? Some are super competitive. Some are just there to have fun and stay active. The main thing is they're consistently engaged. And then there's the transfer. They might move on from one specific sport, but they're not done with being active. Maybe they try something totally different, or maybe they find another sport that clicks better.
Yeah, sometimes it's not about burning out, it's about branching out, finding the right fit as their interests change and they figure out what they're good at.
And that's key, right? We can't just assume the worst when a young athlete leaves a sport. It doesn't automatically mean they're giving up on physical activity or personal growth or any of that. The why is so important here.
And those whys rarely make it into those headlines, you know, all the doom and gloom about kids quitting sports. But this research really suggests a much more complex picture.
Totally. And to really understand what's going on, we got to look at all the different factors that play into a young athlete's experience. The PhD thesis uses a really cool metaphor for this, a spider web.
A spider web. Okay, you got to tell me more about this.
So think about it, a spider web. It's intricate, everything's connected, you tug on one thread, and the whole thing is affected, right?
Right.
The thesis basically argues that when a young athlete leaves a sport, and I'm purposely using that phrase instead of drops out, by the way, it's often because of a whole bunch of factors, personal stuff, social stuff, how the sport's organized, all tangled up together.
Okay, so it's not as simple as blaming, say, over-the-top practice schedules or coaches who are too intense. Although the thesis did mention those external pressures a few times, especially from parents who are often the ones doing a lot of the driving around.
Right, those organizational factors definitely matter, but they're not the whole story. Mm-hmm. It's more like everything's connected. Like if you've got a coach who's all about winning, no matter what, that can really mess with a kid's sense of self-worth, make them feel like they're not good enough. The thesis even had this quote from an athlete. They said, when your coach only cares about winning, it makes you feel like you're not good enough. And that feeling, it can be crushing, you know, especially for someone young.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Like one bad experience, especially coming from someone in charge, can really color how a young person sees things, even beyond sports.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the research actually dives even deeper into that, how those experiences can stick with a young person, affect how they see themselves, their abilities long term.
So we're talking about something that goes way beyond just wins and losses on the field, right? This is about a young person's developing sense of self.
100%.
Yeah.
And that's where the whole social side of youth sports comes into play. And that's a whole other layer of complexity.
Because let's face it, those years on a team, it's like a crash course in relationships, right?
Yeah.
All the ups and downs, figuring out how to navigate those dynamics with teammates, with coaches. In fact, the PhD thesis even had a whole section on that, how athletes view those relationships. I thought it was interesting. Some of them talked about their coaches being super supportive, like real mentors, both on and off the field, right?
Yeah, for sure. And those athletes, they were clear about how important it was to have a coach who actually cared about them as people, not just players. Someone invested in their well-being, their personal growth. They talked about feeling like they belonged, like they were valued, respected, and that the coach really fostered that kind of team culture.
Which is amazing when it's like that, but we all know it's not always sunshine and roses. The research touched on those less than ideal situations too, right? Like those high pressure environments where it's all about winning can get kind of toxic, can it?
Absolutely. And when that happens, it can really mess with the social dynamics. Some athletes described feeling constantly judged, criticized, or even like pitted against their own teammates. And when that stuff comes from the coach or it's just baked into how the team operates, well, that can be really damaging to a young person's self-worth,
Yeah, it's tough to hear that. Imagine being a kid and dreading practice, feeling like you have to choose between a sport you love and feeling good about yourself. No wonder some kids, especially in those pressure cooker environments, decide it's just not worth it.
Right. And sometimes it's not even about negativity per se. It's just life,
Yeah.
Kids have a lot going on these days, way more than we often give them credit for. School, extracurriculars, some even have part-time jobs on top of everything else. And trying to squeeze in some semblance of a social life, it's a lot to manage, even for adults.
It's true, they're juggling a lot, and something's got to give eventually. So for some kids, that ends up being the sport, especially when you factor in how much time organized sports can take up.
Oh, for sure. We underestimate that all the time. The sheer number of hours dedicated to, especially if you're talking higher levels of competition, multiple practices a week, weekend tournaments, travel, and that's not even counting any off-season training or conditioning.
And don't forget about the parents. The thesis had some pretty telling quotes from moms and dads who are definitely feeling the pressure of those crazy schedules, all the driving around. It's a huge commitment for the whole family, really.
Huge is right. And honestly, sometimes those packed schedules, they just don't leave room for anything else.
Yeah.
The research found that some young athletes, especially as they got a bit older, into adolescence, they started feeling torn. Like they'd discover a new interest, music, robotics, whatever. And they're excited about it, but those things take time too, right? So then it's like this balancing act, trying to fit it all in, and that's tough.
It's that classic dilemma, having to prioritize. And sometimes those choices, they aren't really choices, are they? It's more like a necessity. So then how do we help young people find that balance? Create an environment where they don't have to choose between sports and all these other amazing opportunities?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question. And I think a big part of it is, well, it's got to start with how we view things. Instead of seeing sports and other activities as this either thing, what if we started thinking of them more like they can complement each other?
So instead of pushing kids to go all in on one sport super early, maybe we encourage them to, try a bunch of different things, see what sparks their interest, let them nurture their curiosity, let them develop different skills.
Exactly. Because those experiences, even the ones that don't last forever, they still matter. They help kids figure out who they are, what they're good at. Maybe they uncover some hidden talent they never knew they had.
Who knows? Maybe if we eased up on the pressure a bit, let them explore, we might even see more kids sticking with sports long term. Because it's something they genuinely love, not just something they feel like they have to do.
Right. It's about that intrinsic motivation, right? Coming from a place of genuine passion for the sport.
And that takes us right back to why we're having this conversation in the first place, doesn't it? It's not about trying to force every kid to play sports forever. It's about understanding those individual journeys, why they might decide to move on. And I think even more importantly, it's about creating an environment that's supportive and empowering for all young athletes, no matter what path they choose. So it's not about keeping every kid in competitive sports forever. So then what does a positive youth sports experience actually look like? What happens when someone does move on? Like they're done with the sport or maybe they just need a break. How do we handle those transitions?
That's where I think we need to get better at this whole idea of transition, Instead of seeing these young athletes as like failures because they're not playing anymore. How do we as a society, how do we support them, help them find new ways to grow? I mean, the research even mentions this, how we need to broaden our definition of what success even means. It's not always about trophies and scholarships.
Right. Like there are so many ways to live a good life, a successful life. And yeah, maybe organized sports aren't part of the picture for everyone, at least not in the long term.
Yeah, totally. And this is where all those soft skills that sports help develop, they can really come in handy. You know what I mean? Teamwork, communication, leadership, problem solving, resilience. These things matter. And not just on a field or a court.
Totally. It's like, remember those participation trophies everyone makes fun of? Maybe we were onto something, but instead of just saying, hey, good effort, it's about acknowledging those real skills kids are building through sports. And those skills, those are valuable no matter what you end up doing in life.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if we can help young people see those experiences as valuable, even if they don't go pro, that's huge. It's about helping them connect the dots, how what they learned in sports, it actually applies to the real world, no matter what path they choose.
Yeah. So how do we do that? How do we build those bridges between like the world of organized sports and everything else? Those other ways kids can grow and learn and find their thing.
Well, we could start by creating more of those intentional pathways, Give them opportunities to explore different interests. Workshops, mentorship programs, community service, internships, anything that lets them apply those skills, those sports skills, in a different setting.
Show them that, what they learned in sports, it matters. It can help them succeed in so many ways,
100%. And it's on us, the adults, to provide that guidance, that support as they're figuring things out, help them identify their strengths, set new goals, and build a life that they're stoked about, a life that makes sense for them.
This has been, I'm telling you, such an eye-opening conversation. We really dug into the reasons why some young athletes leave organized sports, busted some myths about dropout, and talked about how crucial it is to create a more supportive environment for all young people, whether they're super athletes or not.
At the end of the day, that's what it comes down to, isn't it? Recognizing that every kid is different, their journey is their own, and our job is to make sure they have what they need to thrive, whatever that looks like for them.
And on that note, we'll leave you with this. How can we, parents, coaches, teachers, everyone really, how can we challenge those assumptions we have about success? How do we create a culture where different talents, different passions, different paths, how do we celebrate all of that? Think about it. And until next time, thanks for joining us for another deep dive.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
When your company earns unlimited 2% cash back on all purchases with Capital One, that's serious business. So Stephen at SandCloud got a serious business card, the Spark Cash Plus card from Capital One.
We used our 2% cash back to help build our retail presence.
Savvy, Stephen.
And we get big purchasing power, so our business can spend more and earn more.
The Spark Cash Plus card from Capital One. What's in your wallet?
Terms and conditions apply. Find out more at CapitalOne.com/SparkCashPlus.